Hey Denchpegs, what's going on? It's Landon Remixes here, and welcome to the 13th edition of Rapid Fire Reviews, the series where I talk minimally about album releases I either didn't get enough time to review or just don't have a lot to say about. Without delay, let's get into the first one, which is ZHU's debut album, Generationwhy, and you guys were requesting this one a lot, and I was actually planning on doing a review of it. As time went on and the more and more I listened to this album, the less and less I felt like I had to say about it. ZHU has a very unique brand of deep house, which is very dark and vocal-centric, using his own vocals, and that reflects on both of his first EPs, one of which, the Genesis series EP, I actually did a review of. His general style is reflected on both of these EPs, and of course this returns for his debut album. It's not like this album sounds like ZHU's trying to rip off some of the other big mainstream deep house names like Disclosure. There are definitely some other clear influences on this album though, like the track In the Morning heavily reminds me of Deadmau5's classic stuff, which made it no surprise for me when Cascade went and remixed this track, which I like that remix a lot as well. There are a lot of really cool tracks on this one and a lot of really cool features as well, especially in terms of vocals. InQ, who was on Start a Fire from Steven's Sincerely album, makes a return on this album for the track Good Life, as well as the vocalist James Young on the track Hometown Girl, which was probably, honestly, one of my favorites as well. Generationwhy made a really well-rounded debut album. I just don't think it had a lot of points in it that really stuck out to me enough that I could have done a really in-depth review of it. The next one I'm going to talk about is the 10th album from the American Christian rock band Skillet, called Unleashed. If you remember my mid-year review, you'll remember this album as one of the ones that I said I was really looking forward to for the rest of the year, and when this album finally dropped, I was generally disappointed with the result, and a lot of my favorite critics actually went in to review this one, so I just kind of stepped back and figured, hey, I'll touch on this at some point, but I don't really want to do a full review for this when so many people are covering it so heavily. In my opinion, I don't necessarily see this album as bad as a lot of critics are seeing it, especially because I am a Christian myself. In terms of this album's production and overall sound, I actually think it sounds pretty good, but then in terms of lyricism, I can definitely see how the lyrics of this thing are really pushing people away. Even some of my favorite tracks on this album, like I Wanna Live and Stars, just have some of the cheesiest lyrical collections throughout the entire thing. Also, a large majority of this album kind of sounds like Skillet's trying to make like a WWE soundtrack with these really fight and heavy themes, like Undefeated, Famous, Out of Hell. Like I already mentioned, I don't think this thing is necessarily terrible, but it definitely wasn't good, and especially made a bad follow-up to the Rise album, which I actually liked quite a bit. I don't think Skillet's put out a really great record since Comatose, but this one really takes the cake as probably their worst record. The next one I'm going to talk about is the newest EP from Botnek, which is called Connecting. I was going to do a full review of this one as well, but I really just didn't feel like I had a whole lot to say about this thing. My biggest thoughts about the EP are this. Botnek has a very distinct sound that I feel like they pulled out very successfully and continue to evolve over the last couple years, but with this EP, some of the spots on it actually kind of seem like a step back. Especially in recent months, we've seen Botnek really expanding into some new styles that are really working for them, like their remix of Stressed Out by 21 Pilots, which is just absolutely insane and noisy. But with this EP, Botnek kind of seems to be stepping back, kind of going into the sounds of their influences, like Justice, for example. Sadly, I think the best spots on this EP are the places where they kind of stick to their more comfortable sound, which is really just saddening to me. Songs like Clickbait and Bad Bit are really clicking with me a lot, and I could definitely see myself using these as live tools. Because Botnek's sound is so distinct, you can definitely just tell it's them right off the bat. I haven't always been the biggest fan of Botnek's sound, but it has grown on me a lot more in the recent years, and that's probably why I like these tracks a little bit more than the spots where they seem to be pulling back a little bit. Noisia's Outer Edges, this thing is just such hard experimental EDM that I have absolutely nothing to say about it, but it's good. Oh boy, it's good. The last one I'm going to talk about today is the newest EP from Party Favor, Party and Destroy. I actually like this one quite a bit, and it's probably one of my favorite projects from a trap artist that I've seen this year thus far. Just the sheer amount of absolutely huge guests that Party Favor features on this 6-track EP is just stunning to me. We get Sean Kingston, we get Dylan Francis, we get freaking Gucci Mane on this thing. Although I don't feel like Party Favor is carrying any kind of distinct sound throughout this EP, I think he does a very good job producing the genres that he does plunge into on this thing. We get some Moombahton, a bunch of trap, we get dancehall EDM, and I feel like these all tie in together very well to form a very solid EP. I at least feel the need to point out one big thing on this EP, and that's that the melody in the track Whole Lotta Money sounds practically identical to the Lavender Town theme from the original Pokemon games. And don't get me wrong, I actually think this sounds really good, I just thought it was kind of funny. In all seriousness though, following this EP, I can definitely see Party Favor kind of following in the footsteps of Dylan Francis and just absolutely blowing up. I think he's got a great future ahead of him, especially with this EP's very well-rounded sound. It felt really good to get some of these thoughts and opinions off my chest. Especially since I've been sitting on some of these for a couple months, it just feels really good to finally be able to talk about them, and I'm sure a couple of you guys have been patiently or not so patiently waiting for my review of ZHU's album, and maybe a couple others. No matter, I hope you guys enjoyed this edition of Rapid Fire Reviews, and I'll see you guys later. Peace.